So you want to buy an UltraGear, but you don't know what to get. Do you need like a giant 49-inch screen like this guy? Or do you want like a 27-inch high refresh rate monitor? It's hard to know what exactly you want when you haven't tried any of those things, especially when you're looking at stuff that's 32:9 and like 1000R curvature. That's what you're gonna get when you get the new LG GR85DC. Comes in a huge box that I honestly might need help with today because we can't tell. Well, actually, you know, it's not as bad as I thought. I could have lifted this myself. I need a knife. Honestly, it's pretty good that we've got a standing desk that's adjustable because this box is huge. We've got some instructions on the side here. Don't use an electric screwdriver. Don't do that. What's that called, a drill? Don't screw into the panel. That's bad. That says you can pivot it, so that's cool. Don't use two hands from the bottom. All right, I'm just gonna, you know, open it. We got our stand here, pretty typical for LG. It's just gonna click-clack into the monitor, and it's got a nice column that we'll screw into from the bottom. What else we got? The rest of the stand. Yeah, so when you've got a display that's like this wide, you kind of need a really wide stand for it so that it doesn't get super unwieldy. And it's gonna take up a lot of desk space, whether you like it or not. I guess you could use a monitor arm if you want to, but like the reality is for something that's 49 inches, it's gonna be pretty heavy and you're gonna need a much more robust arm, and it might cost you about $100, but when you're spending this much on a monitor, maybe that's worth it to you. And this is a cable cover, little clip doodad to help you keep all your cables in place. And then we got a bunch of cables. We got a USB-A to USB-B, DisplayPort, HDMI, some documentation, and a standard C13 power cable. Oh, color temperature, 6500 Kelvin, okay. Max delta E value of less than 5, it's a pass. All right, so it's relatively color accurate, but less than 5 isn't all that impressive these days. Most monitors that we're getting that are a premium display end up being typically around less than 2 in the report coming from the factory. And then we measure them and they're usually around that as well. This is another clip. I actually don't know what this clip is for. I've never seen this one before. We'll take our styrofoam off. Oh baby. As you can see, it's curved. It's got 1000R curvature. And that's part of why the box is so incredibly deep. It does suck how much extra like box depth you get. These are a lot harder to pack and store and move. And I'm always like a little bit afraid of taking them out of the box. So, okay, here's the rest of our display. It's a super chunky housing on this guy, partly because the power is all installed here instead of in like a little external power brick. The stand installs same way most of them do. You just pop it down there, screw it down, and then we're just gonna go into here, down. Now it's ready, you can just pull it out. Okay, here we go. For realsies, oh my God. I don't know what the weight is. Can you check what the weight says for specs? Because this thing's heavy, man. 32.5. Wow, I thought it was heavier. I'm just a weakling now. These are some of the hardest peels I've ever had to take off. They're really on here. There we go. Ooh. But now that it's going, it's going. Something that is actually really common on a lot of LG monitors is they have their I/O just coming straight out the back like this. And while it might make for a slightly uglier presentation when you're looking at the back of the monitor, I gotta say from a utilitarian point, it's just so easy. You just, you know, you come around back and you just plug it in. They're right there. We've got HDMI, DisplayPort, our USB-B port, and then 2 USB-As, along with our big C13 power. And then down here, we've got our headphone jack for anyone who just wants to plug straight into their monitor. Another thing that I like about a lot of LG displays is they've got this really cool premium texture feel on the back here. It's just this kind of pattern texture that runs along the whole back of the monitor. You should be able to see it. It both looks cool and feels pretty good, and so I'm a big fan of that. It looks like we've also got RGB along the sides here. I really wish that instead of vents, or even alongside the vents, just add more RGB. I want a full ring going all the way around, but maybe that's too much to ask, I don't know. As for the stand itself, it's pretty beefy. Feels like aluminum, and yeah, it's not going anywhere, that's for sure. Actually, for table wobble, for a monitor this size, that's like pretty good. I've seen them like really get shaky when you just start adding a bit of shake, and this is not too bad. It can't do a whole lot in terms of like pivot or tilt. Actually, it said it could pivot a little bit in the book, but I don't think it can. Pretty sure I'm just breaking it. But it can tilt a little bit, not a ton. And then is it height adjustable? Yep, it is. So you got a height adjustment for you, which is actually pretty great. Boom, look at this. Yeah, look at all this swivel. It's actually pretty good. I will say, LG makes a good stand. I've never had any issues with their stands. They just kind of work and they look nice. You know what else looks nice? This monitor. Well, at least I hope it does, but we'll see that afterward from our sponsor, Secrelab. You may know them for their best-in-class gaming chairs, but did you know Secrelab makes desks too? Their Magnus Pro isn't your average sit-to-stand desk. It's packed with unique features. Have the cleanest desk around with a patent-pending integrated power supply column and a full-length built-in cable management tray. And of course, the Magnus Pro is fully adjustable as a sit-to-stand desk with a sleek integrated control panel. Check out the Magnus Pro and all of Secretlab's other offerings at the link below. 5120 by 1440. You basically just have two 1440p panels right here. It's a VA panel, and the viewing angles aren't gonna be perfect. So for some of this, while David's shooting me from this angle, it's not gonna look great, and that's not necessarily because the monitor is bad. However, I would like to point out that even straight on, there is a lot of really weird banding going on. I don't know if this is just Windows trying to do stuff, so I'm gonna bring up like a full white website or paint, or a full black paint. It's still not perfect, but it is a little better. So I'm gonna blame that slightly on Windows at least, but yeah, there's still some banding going on. But yeah, I would just like to make that very clear. It's VA, so him shooting like this isn't gonna be totally representative of exactly how good or bad it looks. But
am I crazy? Is there a bunch of noise?
I can't tell if it's glare or not.
No, it's like moved like all along the.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, once you see it.
On the left, right?
Well, it's all across, but it's like, yeah, depending on your viewing angle.
Yeah. That's wild. I wonder if it's because of the screen door effect on this light on the lower resolution. Because let's do a quick little calculator here. While it's 1440p, it's 1440p across a really big display. You know, that's actually surprisingly better than I expected it to be. 108 ppi, almost 109 it's okay. It's totally acceptable. You're really not gonna start getting a ton of screen door effect until you're at a much lower PPI, like 80 or even 90. That being said, you know, 160, 150, anywhere higher is just always better. But yeah, we're sometimes seeing this weird noise and I can't tell what's going on. It's a little weird. Now, that being said, this is a gaming monitor. It does 240 Hertz. It does have HDR. However, I've been told that it's not good HDR. Now, it's doing HDR without any sort of full array local dimming. It's VESA rated at HDR 1000, which just means that it gets over 1000 nits peak brightness, which is cool, but it doesn't matter if your HDR experience is not good. Honestly, right now, just staring at it from the right angle, it looks pretty good. It's not perfect. However, HDR on YouTube is not the same when you're playing games in HDR. So we're gonna fire up a game. We don't have any full array, we just have columns. We have about 6 or 8 columns of brightness that just edge light the screen. And when you're playing games, it looks bad. When you press the button, you get input, game mode, power off, settings. We're just gonna hit settings. I actually really like how the UG for UltraGear kind of like flashes every now and then. That looks pretty cool. And then you can change whatever your different game modes are. The Gamer 1 definitely looks the best to me. These are all way too dark. I don't know what they're doing. So for adaptive sync, we've got FreeSync Premium Pro, which is pretty great. It's not G-Sync, but whatever. FreeSync is pretty decent overall. Extended, basic, off, use whatever you want. Response time, faster, fast, normal. I'm gonna put it down to fast because a lot of times on screens like this, when you go with faster, it can introduce a little bit inverse ghosting because it's trying to fix it too much. Picture adjust, you know, we've got just brightness, sharpness. In different modes other than game mode, like especially if we put it to say vivid, or if we just turned game mode itself off, we could probably change more of these settings. Yeah, you can see that changing down to this one actually eliminated sharpness. So let's just go back to Gamer 1, which is the only one that's certified, actually. Interesting. And then for input, oh, we've got PBP and PIP with a bunch of different options. This is actually really great. I like how clear they've made all of your selections here. And one of the best things about PBP or PIP, I don't need it in the majority of monitors, but when something's like 32:9, especially if you have consoles or another computer, like a laptop maybe, It's really handy to actually be able to be like, no, this half of the screen is like my PS5 and I'm just gonna game here, and then this is my computer and this is like, you know, Reddit or Discord or whatever you want to keep up there. Super handy feature, and it's actually why I was super mad when the Arc came out, because it didn't do PvP or PIP. For giant screen, I was furious. As for smoothness, it definitely feels like 240 hertz and it looks pretty good. It doesn't get too smeary or gross when I do a quick pan here. And you know, in terms of contrast, like, it's okay. It's definitely closer to 2000 to 1 rather than it is anything higher than that. But yeah, when you move around, it has trouble. Oh, there we go.
Oh, yeah.
Now we can see it. Okay. Here's what I'm talking about for bad HDR. And I know that it looked good in game here, but I want to be very clear. Some games don't handle this stuff well. When I was playing Elden Ring, it was on my old MSI Creator panel, and it had the same like 6 or 8 columns of edge lighting. And for that, you'd have like a single torch on screen, and you'd have a column of brightness on your screen. It just looks awful. You can just see as I pan the mouse across. You see all this bloom? Even just this guy, this UI element, look at how much they're brightening around that section. So as I pass my mouse around, it's saying, hey, there's a bright spot there. We want to illuminate that bright spot and crank the brightness for HDR. But what it's doing is it's like, okay, pump the light in from here and here. And it doesn't do it very well. It doesn't illuminate that pinpoint of brightness that you get from a true HDR experience with OLED is a perfect example, or even mini LED, as long as they have like 500, 1000 plus zones. They might have blooming and haloing in mini LED, but you know, it's not a full column of bloom. It's like, oh, your cursor's a little bright around the edges. Another thing to note is look how slowly it fades from bright to black. Look how long that takes. Now, as for testing, it's not too bad. I mean, the display boasts a 95% coverage of DCI-P3, and it says about 2500 to 1 contrast ratio, but we did measure more like 2800 to 1, which is okay. And it does that 95%. We measured 95% in DCI-P3 and we got about 100% in sRGB. So it's got a pretty decent color gamut. As for accuracy, it's, you know, a little bit of a different story. Our report says delta E of no less than 5 in all colors, which isn't quite correct. We did get an average of 3.6. However, we got a high end of 8.6, and I think a yellow particularly hits over 5. It's closer to 6 on that too. So it's not perfect for color work. You can calibrate it to get a better image, but I don't know. The problem is a lot of other displays, they might not be as big and as curved as this guy, but they are going to be more color accurate, at least if they specify that they are. Delta E of 2 or less is very common these days, so that's kind of what your target should be. As for brightness, we got about 450 nits in SDR, which isn't crazy bright considering the HDR 1000 VESA rating. However, HDR, we measured 1235 nits, which is really bright, but you saw how we're getting that brightness. It's this weird column edge lighting that just doesn't look good in a lot of scenarios. You might not notice it in all of your games, and you might not even notice it until you pause the game and start moving around on a black screen. But when you do, it really takes you out. As for latency, it's pretty fast at 2.4 milliseconds at 240 hertz, but that's largely due to the 240 hertz refresh rate. I like the monitor, but how much does it cost? Well, it's $1,300, which it's a lot of money, and I think I know why. It's because it's like they're trying to do too many things at once and throw a big sticker price on it. I think that at this size and at this price, you can find something that's either maybe a little smaller but significantly nicer, or it's all the same here, but a much nicer panel for maybe a couple $100 more. I don't think I can recommend the LG 49GR85DC. Wow, what a mouthful. It's just not really the monitor for me. I think at this price point, you're better off getting a smaller screen with better display tech, or if you really need something this big, get a TV instead. Get a C2 when it's on sale. Get a C1 on sale, 48 inch. You know, it's great TV. This is ShortCircuit, and you know, if you want to check out a monitor with good local dimming, check out the Sony InZone M9. It's got 100 zones, well, 96, but who's counting?